See this here? This is like half your problems for the prototype, and I'm going to explain why, because I have some thoughts about what went wrong for the prototype in Chapter 5 and what may have gone right. There's a lot of exciting things to say about this character, so let's get into it. When we were first introduced to the prototype all those years ago, he was just a claw on a screen. He was teased in each chapter as this mismatch of body parts from the different toys he'd either killed or scavenged. Later, we saw his mechanical spider legs, while the rest of him was kept secret. In the world of Poppy Playtime, this is the most hyped up character the series has. You can imagine the design better be good, otherwise, you might not get the response you want. And needless to say, reactions to him have been mixed. So, for a moment, let's just focus on his design. The prototype is a half mechanical spider, half jester, with a few limbs from other toys sticking out of his chassis. He has sharp claws and a creepy grin and likes to aura farm. So is this design scary? My initial reaction was also mixed. I think he's creepy, sure, but it feels like he's trying to be more cool. The biggest issue for me is that he feels like one design stacked on top of the other. Mechanical Spider and Jester. Funny enough, this is the exact same problem It Chapter 2 had, where they made Pennywise the Dancing Clown's final form a half clown, half spider. And it didn't work there. Part of the problem is your brain is trying to make sense of what it's seeing. Take Huggy, for example. We see him and think, oh, it's a toy, but there's something off about him. His design makes sense to your brain because it's a single idea. We can imagine seeing him in a toy store, so it's easy to suspend disbelief. When he opens his mouth showing his teeth, it's pretty horrifying, but it still makes sense because the toy hasn't changed shape. He's just revealed a part of himself that was hidden. And he already had a mouth, so why not teeth? The same works for Yarnaby and other monsters in the game which have a mostly cohesive design. They are one thing, but something is slightly off. But if you design a monster which now has two very defined separate parts, now the brain says, oh, it's a jester and a mechanical spider. Suddenly you're trying to make sense of this thing and your suspension of disbelief gets in the way of the horror, because a unified monster design gives your brain something easy to comprehend. If we have to pause and try to understand why your monster looks a certain way, then something's probably gone wrong. This is why many of the Poppy monsters work best when they stay as just one thing. If you jumble in two drastically different things, it becomes distracting, not scary. I think the prototype worked better when he was just claws and legs. It's kind of like how Jaws is scarier when we don't see the shark. Most of the time, the prototype feels threatening when he's hidden, not just because he's mechanical, a single idea for us to think about, but also because the mystery makes him scarier. There isn't a face you could put on these limbs to justify the build-up, in my opinion. And boy, was there a lot of build-up. This isn't to say you can't mix two things and create something scary. Just look at Doom. These monsters all work because they make the mismatch horrifying. The fact that these two halves shouldn't connect is supposed to be unsettling. It's a design choice. And so in a strange way, they're more cohesive than the prototype. The prototype is too clean cut. The way his jester half connects is just too normal. It's just a guy on top of some legs. It feels like they didn't want him to look too strange and mismatched, but that's what would have been scarier, because it would have drawn attention to the wrongness of the design. Let's pause for a minute and look at this really cool fan art. This was shared by Isaac Christopher, one of the original Poppy creators, who says this fan art is very close to what they had planned for the prototype. It leans into that idea of the prototype being this mess of toy parts, rather than the cleaner design we got. Because that's a single idea, it works better. Another great example is Miss Delight. When I see Miss Delight, I understand her design right away. She's supposed to be a toy teacher with a smiling face. Someone attacked her and now her face is cracked, revealing this gory human underlayer. It has story context and makes sense for a toy that was once human. But the horror they tried to give the prototype doesn't make sense. Who is the jester for? He doesn't look like a toy jester, and he's part mechanical spider. Why is he grinning like that? I don't know. He's just been designed this way. You see my problem? He's not making sense on a story level or a game level. It feels as if the devs just said, you know what's cool and creepy? A jester. So let's make that the central part of his top design. The mechanical parts make sense because we understand this monster was a prototype, and therefore it doesn't have to be a toy for kids. He was more experimental in nature. It's an early attempt to bring something to life. But if it's not designed for kids, because why would it be? Then why does it have a jester face? Okay, I feel like I'm going in circles, so I'm going to leave it there. There is a jester in that original design, and I think it works better because it looks like it's part of a greater whole. The game made a big deal about this creature being a mix of different parts, but it feels like instead they played it very safe and generic. By being less messy, this version draws attention to itself in a way that's confusing. And it just seems strange to build up the idea of it having many parts, and then to not go through with it. And if you want a Jack-in-the-Box toy, we already have Boxy Boo, he's right there. An amazing design that still hasn't seen the light of day. And he's terrifying. Justice for Boxy Boo. Actually, I hate boxy players in Project Playtime, so never mind. But you know what? It's forgivable to have a confusing design. You can make up for that with great gameplay, showing how scary this big bad really is. So let's have a look at the game.
Should be some disconnect levers around there.
Oh dear. The gameplay is a big factor in whether a monster design works or doesn't. Unfortunately for the prototype, his first major scene is a cutscene. This goes against mostly everything we experience with scarier poppy monsters. The tea party is a big problem here. As cool as it is to see the prototype just strut in to join us, this was a bad way to introduce him. He's so focused on Poppy that we, the player, fade into the background, only briefly spoken to once during this entire scene. We're stuck watching this family melodrama play out. A monster in a game should be focused on the player because that raises tension and sense of threat. But here, the player has no agency. We might as well not even be there. The scene is purely for story about other characters. Kissy Missy has more agency in this scene. And don't get me wrong, I like seeing her beat on the prototype, but is this really the best way to make him scary to your player? No. The problem is they wanted to show off the design, to pause the gameplay so you can stare at this guy for a bit. Instead of actively dealing with him like we do most monsters, we instead passively watch. And we've been passively observing him through multiple cutscenes throughout the chapters, so at this point it's getting a little old. The longer it goes on for, the more the tension is killed. You already had to convince me on the design, and I wasn't, and now you're making me look at the design instead of having the monster in active gameplay. If you want to see more engaging horror in a dinner scene, just watch Resident Evil Biohazard. The introduction to the Baker's family in that was amazing. The player is actively hurt and made to feel intimidated by the family. And on top of this, they don't linger very long before you're able to play and try to avoid them. But here, as we regain control, the prototype runs away. It's not a good look. Now they do switch this up at the end of the train chase, but by then the damage is done. And worse, the train sequence, as many will know, has way too many puzzles. And that's fine, you don't need to make Poppy Playtime a pure horror game, but if your intent was to make this monster scary, this wasn't the way to do it. Chapter 5 was supposed to be the one where we finally face this big villain, but he's barely in it. I wasn't that bothered because I'm really just here for Huggy and Kissy, God bless their souls. They will return. But when scripting this video, it really stood out to me how little he's in it. And when he is, half of the time is cutscenes. So my overall thoughts on the prototype are pretty mixed. I do think his design still has potential to be very menacing. When he first entered Lily's home and showed his face, I did think he was creepy, but the gameplay didn't back it up, because there was barely any to it. They could have gone so much further with his design and made it truly monstrous, more broken and damaged. Right now he looks too clean, as if they're afraid to ruin the design. Even after he gets burnt after the train crash, he doesn't look that different. But if you want horror, you gotta get messy. I guess we'll just have to see what they do in Chapter 6. These are my thoughts. What about yours? I've seen a lot of people really like his design, and I respect it. But I do think as the dust settles in the future, people may look back on him a bit more critically. Are there any other characters in this game or horror titles you'd like me to talk about next? Let me know if you have any ideas, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.